Good evening everybody, and welcome to yet another event for Carlow Mental Health Association's Minsan Festival for 2021. My name is Catherine Delaney and I'm joined tonight by Father John Dunphy, who has kindly agreed to have a discussion with me tonight entitled My Thoughts, My Understanding. As a lot of you may know, Father John Dunphy is a well-known figure. He's parish priest of Graiguecullen and Collection parishes. Father John is recognised for his work in establishing St. Clare's Hospitality Kitchen in 2013. He's seen the need to combat the ongoing needs of families in Carlow, Graiguecullen and Collection areas. He's also the chairperson of St. Mary's Knockbeg College, and I'm sure he's involved with lots more boards and committees in the area as well. He's a man of great wisdom and compassion. And tonight we're going to have an honest conversation about life, wellness, coping techniques, mental health, dealing with grief during COVID, spirituality and daily trials and tribulations. So welcome Father Dunphy, and thank you for joining me tonight. I'm going to start off by asking you to tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your siblings and what life is like growing up for you.
Okay, thanks Catherine. I'm glad to join you. A little bit out of my comfort zone, but I prefer to be behind an altar or an animal in the church. But anyway, I'm delighted to be here and to talk to you. I'm from Graiguecullen in Laois, so I am a Laois man. We grew up on a farm. And my mum is still alive, thank God. She's over in St. Felix House, our parish home for independent living here in Graiguecullen, St. Felix House. My father passed away 3 years ago. I have 3 sisters and 1 brother, and as I said, we grew up on the farm. Growing up on the farm in the 60s and 70s, I suppose it's a different world than it is today. Something that was very important to us always was faith. We had family prayer. We always went to church together as a family. And that stood to me, I think, going forward in my life as well.
How did you decide to become a priest?
Oh, good question. As I suppose, as I said already, faith was very important to us growing up and going to school as well. Faith was priesthood was a genuine option for young men in my age to consider going to the priesthood, not so much now, obviously. I was blessed that we had a lovely experience of priests in our parish at home who would visit us very regularly. I know my father used to do farm work for one of the priests, so that's the way we lived. Yeah. Also my uncle was a priest, and I visited him and stayed with him a good bit. I was very taken by the type of work he was doing as well. And then I was blessed too that I went to the Salesian College in Graiguecullen. That was priests and brothers. And I had a lovely experience of priesthood from them. Got great inspiration from them in their lives. And then I had great support from home as well too. So all of that told me that this was a genuine option for me. And I answered an ad that I saw at the back of the church one day. And in fact it happened fully because I was waiting for the school bus. It started to rain, so I was at the back of the church, and in the porch I saw a poster inviting young men of my age. I was in 5th year in secondary school at the time. Would you be interested in priesthood to go to a weekend in St. Patrick's College in Carlow to discern? And I went along, and at that time it was from the diocese 120 young lads my age.
120?
Yeah, and then when we were finished, we were asked if we'd like to come back again in our 6th year class, leaving 3rd year. So there's about 40 came back who were still interested. And then of that, 5 went forward to study for the priesthood again. So there was a sense of divine providence in it, I think too. I always thought I was being called in to look at see that poster at the back of the church.
That's a beautiful story.
Isn't it?
Yeah, lovely. As a parish priest dealing with your community, it's a vast area, not just spiritually, but to deal with domestic abuse, poverty, etc. How do you cope with this?
Well, I suppose just to say for us as a parish, and I'm blessed with a very strong parish team here, consisting of Suzanne and Katrina and Nicola, regularly, and our vision statement for the parish is a community of prayer, celebrating Eucharist, which we try to put a lot of effort into. But thirdly, which perhaps is the most important one, there is the outreach. You know, that we always model ourselves on the early Christians who prayed, celebrated Mass, but they also looked out and cared for one another. And so as we as a parish, we always try to reach out, whatever way it is. And people looking at the church from the outside might, or even looking at the work of the priest, might think, well, he says Mass and he doesn't do much else. Maybe he says a few weddings, funerals, Christmas, but actually there's an awful lot more happening as well within our work. Any time of the day somebody could call in need. And really basically they might have some domestic problems, some mental health issues, some suffering issues, maybe illness or whatever, and they sometimes just need a listening ear maybe, but they also need help as well. And we like to be able to tell them where to go to get the help that they need in a particular area as well, because we do emphasize to people, please talk about your problem, don't bottle it up. There's so many people, so many groups out there to help you in that. A big thing we came across, you mentioned earlier, 2013 we formed St. Clair's Hospitality and Food Kitchen. At that time, you know, Ireland was in the recession, pretty much since, and we found that there was a new poor developing in our parish, and why did that? And more people were coming to my door looking for food, or money for food. And as a group, as a parish, we decided, listen, if we're going to be a Christian community, the basic thing is people need to be fed. And so we came up with the idea of feeding people. So we initially started with giving out food parcels. We put out food bins in our churches. We also put out, and not just Graiguecullen, by all means, we got huge support from all the churches in Carlow, town and county as well. And local businesses came on board with donations to us as well, and schools were brilliant, and they were fundraising for us, and people were giving us donations. So we ended up giving out about 180 food parcels a week. People would come in and pack them, and then we would deliver them to the homes. But we wanted to have more of a hospitality element to it, so mothering ourselves with Brother Kevin up in Dublin. And we got a lovely premises from Bobby Quinn, a whole story in itself now, how Bobby and Mary Quinn came on board to give us this building. And again, it was divine providence, because we prayed that we get a suitable building, and we looked around all the empty buildings around it. And the only reply we got was from Bobby and Mary saying, I think I had something for you, and it was perfect for us. And we turned it in through the help of volunteers, craftsmen, and painters, plasterers, bricklayers, electricians. They all came on board, and we turned it into the St. Clair's Hospitality Food Kitchen, which we opened its doors to, and we were serving, some days we could serve up to 120 meals a day to people, and they were people, and that was 5 days a week we were open for this, so we're getting a holiday and we're enjoying hospitality as well. And then the third element of that project, which we just had opened one day, which was to open the Welcome Centre again. Bobby and Mary Quinn came to rescue another building, and that is a place where people who have nothing to do all day, they might come and get a cup of tea, read a paper, watch a film, do their laundry, whatever we were setting up in that. We opened it for one day when COVID came and we had to close it. So we hope to have that open again pretty soon.
And where is that building?
That is quite close to where the food kitchen is, on the main street. Just over the Graiguecullen Bridge into Carlow on the right hand side there.
Okay, that will be a lovely facility to have for.
I think that it's so close to St. Clair's Hospitality Kitchen that there's an actual, you can go and get your meal, and then you can come and spend a few hours.
Lovely. That's very nice.
Meeting people or whatever. So
that's lovely.
So also another thing, like that's one outreach. St. Vincent de Paul in all our parishes, they do tremendous outreach to people as well. You know, we have Legion of Mary, people we never forget. We have a lovely welcome group here in the parish where we go to new homes and welcome new parishioners and have a little welcome back that we give them as well. So an outreach is very much part of our mission. It's not just a church.
Yeah. So for people then that would approach you, you have somewhere that you can tell them that they can go that will help them in
Absolutely.
their time of need.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But a lot of them is maybe to go to a trained counsellor, which they do need, which I'm not, because I think it's important if someone needs, especially with mental health issues, that they go and talk to somebody, they don't bottle it up, and there's loads of good people out there, trained, listeners for them to go, and we'll always refer them to people like that.
That's fantastic, yeah. Okay. So you support your parishioners. What do you do to support your own mental health and wellness? And what are your tools and coping techniques?
Wow. The first thing I do every morning when I get up is I go for a walk down the barrow. And I bring my dog Buddy. I think everybody around the world knows who Buddy is at this stage. And I say my rosary going down the river. And I meet my birds. Now, feathered birds. They are and my robins mostly. And I feed them. They always are waiting for me, and I feed the robins. So that's a lovely thing. That really, no matter here or snow, I have to go down to the river. So that relaxes me for the day, you know. My day most of the time is quite busy, so I would always spend about 10 minutes quietly going through the things I have that day, particularly the things I'm worried about. And I do offer them up a little prayer to God, asking God to guide me through those days. I spent a good while this morning for this, but little things like that. You know, prayer for me, particularly during COVID, was very, very important to me. Right through the COVID, the phrase that kept coming up from Scripture and from the Eucharist I was celebrating was Jesus saying to people, courage, don't be afraid. And that gave me great strength. And he used to often add, have faith and have peace. You know, so the message of Jesus actually, to me, gave me great peace and strength. And it always does, I must say. I'm here as a priest, and my faith is my number one thing for me, and I am not going to talk about it. I am not ashamed of it, because it does give me great strength and great peace. And, you know, in the Bible, a little interesting fact, the words "do not be afraid" occurs 365 times. So one for every day of the year. So that's my faith and my prayer is certainly a day that I couldn't pray. That day to me is almost a write-off. Everything going on. And when I do pray well, which is not every day, but I feel much more at peace and able to cope. So that's one thing. I do read as well. I love sport, all sport. So I watch a lot of sport. I can't watch it live, I would tape it. I have my main supporters. Sadly, but anyway I am, and I will do that, watch that, read. I like a nice film, and I like reading biographies as well, you know, as well. So those are the things is what I do to relax and to coping techniques myself. Probably other things as well, but other things I'm just hitting on at the moment. Yeah. Okay.
You mentioned earlier that your dad died 3 years ago. How do you cope with grief and missing a loved one?
Yeah, my father, I suppose thankfully, was almost 94 years of age, so he had a huge age, and it was just so lovely to be with him when he died. And he died in St. Faith's house just across, and he got great love and care there, and we were all, the whole family we were welcomed there for the week that he was dying. So it was a special time for us when he died. Also lost a wonderful brother-in-law as well. I know a number of years ago, my sister's husband lost a little niece, only 9 months old, and a little nephew who was going to be his godfather. He died at hurt as well. So those are little sadnesses, but compared to a lot of families, who suffer huge amount of loss. And some very, very close friends of mine died, and I've journeyed with people who I became very close to, and to died, and to be with them when they died as well. So I always feel the best way to cope is to cry, and I always quote to people, there's no flowers without rain, there's no love without tears. So tears is important. And I think memory is important too. I think, memory keeps a person alive. And I even say, when I have anniversary masses for families and they're still in grief, I say, listen, keep remembering your loved one, because when you do, your loved one is with you, And of course I believe very strongly, and as Christians do, that your loved ones are with God, and your God is close to, and I often end up in a difficult moment talking to my loved ones, to put it in a word for me or something to get me out.
Yeah.
So I in a sense, and probably in a big sense, I feel it with you all the time, that they're not gone, and I do believe that when God calls me, they'll be there for me too, and I'm looking forward to that. Hope it's for a while yet, but when it does, I'm looking forward to meeting them all again.
I've heard of it said that grief is the price you pay for love.
Yeah, actually, no love without tears. I find it very sad sometimes when you see somebody dying and they're not mourned, because you do sense, maybe wrongly, but you do sense that maybe there wasn't the devastation or the love that maybe had been there, but I cope with grief, and thankfully my grief hasn't been anything like what some people I witness have. Some people have horrific grief, and I don't know how they cope, and God loved them, and I know they're in my prayers as well very often, but to seem to cope, and heard a few people in a few interviews recently on people who lost loved ones, and it was lovely that said, my faith got me through. Your faith in Jesus, your faith in resurrection, and the strength that your faith gives you to cope, got them through as well.
Okay, yeah. During the peak months of COVID, it changed how we attended Mass. We had to look at Mass through the webcam. And now, even still, some people are not comfortable to attend Mass. But as a priest, what did you find most difficult about celebrating Mass during COVID?
I suppose I do remember that 13th of March last year, as everyone does, where we were told that we had to close our churches completely, and I remember myself and our sacristan Catherine around here, and we knock at the doors of the church, and both of us were crying, that this is something that probably never happened since penal times or something, but thankfully we had in operation a webcam. And initially we were told only the priest could be there, but then it was laxed straight away and said, musicians, a singer could come in and an organ and musicians could come. So we said Mass to an empty church, we did have a singer and we did have a reader and we did have a musician. But of course, everyone knows Graiguecullen, St. Clair's, we are blessed that we have the Poor Clares here. So while a lot of priests had an empty church, we actually had the Poor Clares praying, and they were a great comfort to us. And they were to our side, they weren't in front of us, but they were down into their own little chapel at the side. So we knew they were there and they were answering up to prayers, so we were very much conscious. But the more we went along, it's interesting, the more conscious we were that people were joining us. And then we did feel a sense of being united with people. And it was lovely, and every priest I know in every parish got the same feedback, that people were joining them and they were sending in words of comfort and appreciation to us for putting on the services of life. So we did, because we hadn't, like our schools were closed, we couldn't go to visit our hospitals, we couldn't visit houses, so lots of our ministry was taken away from us. But so we knew people were cocooning at home, and people were staying at home, and families were gathering at home. So we put on extra services, and we put on evening prayer, night prayer every night. We put on the Angelus journalists at 12 noon every day, because the churches were closed all day. Like people, at that stage, people even couldn't come in and say their quiet prayer, you know, that was relaxed afterwards. The poor Clares would eventually lead the rosary in the Angeles with Mass every morning. We had to always have a brilliant novena every year, and that had to be cancelled, obviously, so we ran it online for people. And we did that the last 2 years now, and we did all our Holy Week ceremonies, which was very difficult to do, all our Holy Week Easter ceremonies online. But we became creative, and we did everything we would have normally done, we tried to do it differently. Even our graveyard masses, cemetery masses. And Katrina Ambassador went out and she recorded me, and we blessed the graves. And then we had an online mass, and on our screens in our churches we would show the online blessing of the graves. So I was able to link in a little bit with people as well. Even our November masses, even like a big thing for us each year is going to Lourdes pilgrimage. So we did a virtual Lourdes pilgrimage from the church as well. We were able to link into the Round of Lourdes and do all of the things as well. So we adapted, and again, I'm blessed with a very, very creative team behind me who work really well. And I must say as well, to end that Father Lino was with me during that time as well, and it was great to have him here as well because of his music, but also the two of us were able to celebrate Mass together, and there was a great sense of camaraderie and fraternal bond between us as well, and a priestly bond between us as well, which was very good as well. So it wasn't as difficult as people think it was, because of the sense of we felt ourselves, we were united people.
That's lovely,
They were with us.
And as you said, all of your fellow priests felt that as well.
That was right across the board. That was universal. We thought we were the only ones who were looking at, but it was them. They're looking at them as well. They're looking at everybody. None of them were. Even though saying that, and every priest would say that too, people were joining from all over the world, you know. So they were linking in from everywhere. Amazing invention that we were able to even our Christmas Mass, which I thought we came up with some of the parishioners who couldn't come home for Christmas, who were cocooning in Australia or Dubai or whatever. We got them to record the prayers of the faithful, and we, at our Christmas Masses, we put them up on the screens, so they were linking in, and the family didn't even know this was going to happen, you know. So
you were very innovative then as well.
So that was the early age, and then obviously the stress then of opening up, you know, and all the regulations and the cords and blocking off seats and signage and pods, and then we were doing 50 in, and we said, oh my God, 50. So how can you manage 50? You're not going to. So then it was relaxed a bit, we could have pods, we could 50. If the church was big, we could pods. But anyway, the huge response we got from stewards and sanitizers and young people were amazing. They all came on board with us. And we were able to open up the churches again. That was a great moment as well. And then for Christmas, of course, massive, our crowds come to Christmas. We put on between Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, we put on 13 masses. There was music at them all, and it was by ticket, and it was, you get your ticket, your code, what door you went into, and Suzanne and Katrina did all that work, and people collected their tickets, and there's music, and there was everything at all the masses, so it was lovely.
Great teamwork.
Great teamwork, but there was a lovely sense of people coming together, and everyone wanted to help, and everyone was so cooperative.
Very good. So your church coped very well with COVID. An integral part of your parish is, as you mentioned earlier, St. Clare's Hospitality Kitchen. How did they cope during COVID?
Well, the kitchen itself, for giving out the meals, closed, and it reopened before the second lockdown for a little while, but on social distancing and very much reduced capacity. But we did keep right through. We kept the food parcels going, and of course there was a huge bigger demand on it now as well, so we had to have more and more. So we normally would pack in two little small rooms over near the swimming pool, but we moved the whole operation into the parish centre to again preserve social distancing for the people, and a group of volunteers, younger volunteers now, because the elderly people were cocooning at this stage, they couldn't come out, and we had brought all the food into the parish centre, and they would pack, and we were doing up to 80, 90, maybe up to 100 bags. And then on the Thursday morning then, thanks to local businesses, another group came in and we put in a fresh loaf of bread and milk and butter into each of the bags.
Essentials, yeah.
Essentials, yeah, as well as all the non-perishable food that we would now send out. And then, again, our delivery men and women were cocooning, so we had to look for outside help, and lo and behold, and thanks to the wonderful work of a Garda Síochána and the Cara First Responders, and one or two younger volunteers, they came and loaded up squad cars or their own cars, and they delivered the parcels for us during it. So it was a brilliant community effort that they did for us. And again, we wouldn't have been able to do that without them, or without the volunteers who came in, and all the people who still managed to donate food to us as well. So we were able to keep it going.
That's lovely. In Ireland, we're well known for doing funerals with dignity and compassion. For you as a priest, you must have found it very difficult to adjust to limited numbers, being able to attend funerals, and for you as a parish priest then to support grieving families during COVID. How did you manage with that?
Yeah, it's probably for me the most difficult part of COVID. And you say we do funerals well, I think, in Ireland in general, and there's lots of stages of that grieving process. And I suppose the first part is to go back for me as a priest not to be able to be physically present with the family of a person who's dying and with the person themselves. Again, we cope a little bit. I've done FaceTime, and some member of the family would hold the phone and I would pray with the family online as well in it. It was particularly difficult for anyone who died of COVID because the family wasn't allowed near them or anybody in hospital, even though this would have been at home, and I would have been in touch on FaceTime. And some cases were horrific, you know, young people dying and the family not being able to dare. I just feel that's so tough. And then if it's COVID, as I say, they didn't even able to see their loved ones. The coffin was closed straight away. So that was a huge burden of people. And even not to be able to do it again, I would have gone with the speaker to houses. I would have stayed outside, I would put the speaker inside, and I would pray the prayers for the family. Or I would have done it on FaceTime again, and to their homes again to say the prayers, because there was everyone was scared, we didn't know what to do. I think I would have done it differently now. But it was near before masses as well, and we had heard so much negative talk about what the virus could do, and that we were genuinely probably afraid and scared ourselves. And then we were told only 10 people could attend the funeral, you know. And you know, the first question a family of a bereaved would ask me, how many are you allowing in? And I said, sorry, they didn't make the rules, but we can bend them a little bit. But for instance, I had one lovely woman I was attending, and she had 16 in her family. So like, can I tell 6 of her siblings or her sons or daughters, children, that you can't come to your mom's funeral? But I've seen so sad cases of family members outside in the rain on their phones trying to watch it on the webcam, or standing in the grave, you know. That was heartbreaking for me as a priest. Never mind the poor family, you know. Grandchildren who loved their grandparent standing outside with the phone, and a huge big church inside, you know. And to me it didn't make sense, the rule. Like, I would have felt that the rule would be better if they named the type of people who come, like grandchildren, sons and daughters, and their partners, and you name it then for the size of churches. Like, that would probably allow 30 people in, and would have been so much easier on families. But anyway, I found that very, very difficult. But there was other ways too, which was very dignified. I used to love the way people lined the route out to the graveyard, and they did it in a very dignified way, and I know families were very taken by that. And again, the whole thing of the undertakers up on RIP.ie with the condolences page, and the undertakers would put all the messages together in a little booklet and present it to the family. And I thought that was
a beautiful tribute.
A beautiful tribute. And another thing that was difficult, because normally at the end of the funeral, at the end of the graveyard, the families would go back to a gathering, whether it's a hotel or home or whatever. They weren't able to do this at this time. That was very, very difficult. And I've seen families heading home on their own after their loved one's funeral.
So
heartbreaking. And I think in a funeral time, I think, which is probably the biggest thing we miss is the hug. Your loved one dies, or as someone belonged to a loved one of yours die, or a friend of yours. No words can say what you want to say, but a hug says everything. A hug says it all. I think it's a huge loss now. And for a parish community, the way we celebrated funerals in the past, the way we put out all the stuff, everything stops when there's a funeral happens. No matter what happens in the parish, that's the way now. We're giving everything to this family and to support them. And it's like as if the parish, or the community maybe, is giving a collective hope to that family as well. And that was taken away. So we know how we missed the physical hug ourselves, but family who lost loved ones, they surely missed the community hug and the support that they would have got as well. Some of the occasions we did try to celebrate Mass afterwards with them, and some of it, we thought it was going to be a short, and then we were all saying there would be a proper memorial Mass afterwards, but then COVID put this was went on much longer than we thought, so now we're 18, 19 months into COVID, and first anniversaries are all over now.
And then there was a thing about headstones couldn't be put up in some graveyards then as well, which was awful for people, families.
And some, thankfully we didn't do it, but I know some parishes, particularly if it was COVID funerals, the remains went straight to the graveyard. There was actually no church service at all, which I thought that was very, very tough for families now.
It was very difficult for families to cope with that. And you knew then as a parish priest, that's what that's what they were dealing with, as well as their grief as well.
And it's not the parish fault, it's just because the parish priest was over 70, so he couldn't come out.
It
was all of those sort of funny sort of rules that frightened us, and we all followed, to the letter of the law.
You're well known for your homilies, your kindness and your compassion, and the novenas here in Graiguecullen Collection Parish. There's a great team here. Where do you get your inspiration from?
I did mention Suzanne, Katrina and Nicola, the team that we work so well together, we meet every week, plan everything. But there's also a huge amount of other groups in our parish, our choirs, and then our finance committee, a wonderful group of people as well, and welcome groups, liturgy groups, and numerous other groups that meet as well, and fabulous bingo as well, and all volunteers, and then we take all the other ministers, readers, Sunday schools, and all of that. But my main inspiration comes from our young people. I think we're very, very blessed to have just wonderful, wonderful young people, and they keep me going, I must say. And Katrina, our youth ministry, wonderful person with them, and she's a great rapport with them as well. And in all our dealings with young people, even before COVID, we were going on pilgrimages, we were going to Lourdes, we were all set to go to Lourdes in the full youth pilgrimage before COVID hit us. But we would have gone overnight, we would have retreats in our parish centre, and they're just so normal young people, and that's the way we would like them. And our message to young people always is, be normal young people, but just find a place for the parish and for God in your life. And there's 4 F's we always emphasize when we're working with our young people. And first F is faith, and then fun, and friendships, and then there's always food involved. So they're looking at them as well. So they're the F's that we sort of base. And we built our parish centre in Graiguecullen, and we put the title of it was Building the Future for Faith. And our parish centre is always alive with young people, doing different projects. If it's St. Bridget's Day, we'll be making St. Bridget's crosses to sell for some charity, or if it's Christmas or Easter, like a Christmas this year, we put in little bits of straw and prayers into little bags and little gifts to parishioners at Mass, and If it's Easter, maybe they'll fill bottles of Easter water or whatever, but they're always doing something. They were fantastic during COVID. They were stewarding and sanitizing, great. And then so many of them become Eucharistic ministers and leaders, choirs, they lead our Sunday schools. So they're a really, really inspirational group of young people, and they keep coming on stream, new ones every year, you know. So they are, but I think all the volunteers, and I think any priest would say that, what inspires them is the amount of volunteers, people who are prepared to give up their time to the parish. You know, that's the public media doesn't recognise that or acknowledge that at all. You know, they focus on maybe negative stuff all the time, but they're not focusing on something that's really, really important for us in the parish and underground, is the amount of wonderful people who would die for their parish through their volunteering and through their faith and through their service to the parish as well. And they're all happy, which is
the most important thing, really, that they're happy to be doing what they're
happy
doing.
doing what they do.
Very good. What advice would you give to people who are currently feeling lonely and isolated?
I suppose I feel, and I think that there's probably two pandemics out there. There's the COVID pandemic, but there's also maybe the pandemic of people feeling lonely and isolation, and maybe having some mental health issues as well. And I suppose my advice to them is that they're not alone. I think one thing during COVID for me was that gave me great help was ringing people around and finding out that they all were feeling exactly the same as I was, that I wasn't the only one who was terrified and frightened and feeling alone. So it's common. And talking to people about it to me was very, very important. You know, for me talking to others. And I would say to anyone out there, if you feel that way, talk to others, because you will find there are so many others exactly feeling the way you're feeling. And that will help you. And just ground yourself a little bit as well, you know. You know, a lot of people who went through different issues and maybe mental health issues or whatever, my advice to them would be, you know, ground yourself in something. And so many people would have told me that, you know, my life got back on track again because I went back. And a lot of them said I went back to my early faith, believe it or not. And I began to think again about growing up and maybe even praying as a family and maybe going to Mass. And so many had decided, you know, I found my life again in that, and I would have started to pray again. I would have even started to go to Mass again. And my advice would be, maybe even before you do that, just go and sit in the church for a little while. Experience the peace of the church and maybe reflect on how your life was years ago and maybe how happy you were. I would always encourage people as well to take up hobbies, whatever it is, walking, running, squash, or whatever. Get out and be active, because you will never be lonely if you're out doing things. So, some advice, I'm sure, but there's a lot of experts more qualified than I am out there. Please go and talk to them as well. Yeah, professionals would have to do it.
That's lovely. Yeah. Talk to me about the power of prayer and your own faith.
Well, I suppose my own faith is based on a personal relationship with Jesus, you know, and I think we tend to forget that. We probably think of the Catholic Church or faith or religion as going to Mass or doing good things or whatever, but in fact it's more than that. It's a personal relationship with Jesus which allows us to do those things. And I'm convinced that, you know, a lot of the issues that our church has had over the last number of years is because we have taken eyes of the person of Jesus. And like Jesus was a person who, okay, he did pray, we know that, he went up into the hills. We know he joined his community in the synagogue on the Sabbath, you know, but where was he the rest of the time? He was out on the highways and the byways. He was with people who were struggling, no matter who they were. He never judged. He was always there trying to comfort and trying to build people into a relationship with him. So my faith is based on a relationship with Jesus. That's the person I pray to. Even when I say the rosary, the rosary is a prayer to Mary, but it's meditating on the life of Jesus. You know, Even I love going to Lourdes, and I went a few weeks ago. I said to myself, that's the first place I'm going when I can go somewhere after the pandemic. I went and I did a private visit to Lourdes, and Lourdes is a place where Mary invites you, but she invites you there to get to know Jesus, you know, and everything is centered around the person of Jesus. So reading scripture, my faith is, and even during the pandemic, I read more and more scripture, which really, really helped me. So that's my faith, just a relationship with Jesus and trying to live as he did, you know. And I think if our church focused more on Jesus, I think we would be a much better church. We will be. The power of prayer, I have great belief in the power of prayer. I'll just give you one example, and it's just a short one, but again, it goes back to the St. Clair's Hospitality Food Kitchen, and we were starting off in the early years, and we were getting into food for the parcels, but the parcels was growing, bigger demand, and we were putting bread and butter and other things in, and we needed money to keep it going, and the food wasn't coming in as much as we would have liked, and so we were running out, and four of us, I named them if you want, Isabel Brooker, Jennifer Mornay, people know her as well, and Brian Murphy, God be good to her, wonderful lady, died a number of years ago, and myself, we came into our parish centre one night and we prayed, and we said, and the prayer we made was simply a one-night prayer. Jesus, if you want this work to continue, you better provide for us. That was the prayer we made, that was the basics anyway, so that was fine. The next morning I went into my letterbox, and I opened it, and this is a true story, and I wouldn't have believed it only it happened to me. And I opened it, and there was an envelope with an anonymous donation with just the words, we heard about the work at St. Clair's Hospitality, this is something towards your work, and there was €1,000 in cash in it. And I went over to tell the others in the office in the parish centre, and with that, a woman walked in, and she said, our family have gathered this for you, we heard about the work at St. Clair's Hospitality, and there's another €1,000.
Wow.
So we definitely put it down to the power of prayer. We never since had any issues with finance for St. Clair's Hospitality because of the goodness of people ever since. So we just felt prayer, but it was Jesus saying, yes, I do want his work to continue. So that's one example, but I could tell you loads of prayers that we would have prayed, or poor Clares would have prayed for people who were sick, and you know, and while they might have got better, they would have got great strength and peace to cope with their illness and their ultimate death as well.
Who would you say is your role model?
I have a few, I suppose, but I'll name one, and that would be St. Francis of Assisi, whose feast day we celebrated actually just a few days ago. I just like his story. I like the way he grew up to have everything he wanted, but his life is empty. And then he read scripture, and he found Jesus through scripture, and he felt a call to go out and work with the poorest of the poor and those in emergence. A wonderful faith life, but it was showed in reaching out to others. And he used to see the presence of Jesus in all the people he met. And then his lovely prayer, which I say every day, I suppose you asked me about my own prayer life as well. I always say the prayer of St. Francis every day, and I teach the children in the school to say them, and get the teachers to teach it as well. And I suppose one line is in giving that we receive as well, you know, but it's a whole model of how we should be living as a Christian, that particular prayer. And Pope Francis picked the name Francis because he wanted to model himself on St. Francis, you know, and he wanted to bring the church more towards the image and the vision of Francis, which was a vision of faith, but showing itself out in the margins of people.
Pearls of wisdom. Have you any advice for people listening in?
Well, I suppose the COVID-19 has taught us lots of things, you know. One big thing it has taught me, and I know has taught a lot of people talking to them, is the importance of slowing down a bit. And during COVID, people got closer to their families, mostly anyway. Probably got on their nerves a little bit as well, but in general, they spent more time with families. And they also maybe reflected a little bit on their important priorities in life for themselves as well. And I know myself, even when I go for my walks during COVID-19, looking up to the clear sky and I wouldn't see any airplanes. So the earth always got a little chance to recover as well. So advice to people is preserve the earth and its way, look out for it in whatever way you can and follow any advice that you've been given. But also to slow down, I think, as well. Slow down and reflect more and prioritise more and spend time more and more with your family and look out for your family, every member, and look out for your neighbours.
And finally, I'm going to ask you, what's your spiritual message to people listening into this conversation tonight?
It's hard to summarise that maybe in one sentence, but maybe I will summarise it in a little quote that I like to give it to people. And that is, if you want to be happy in life, make others happy, because the joy you give to others will come back into your own heart. And I think that is so true. Again, St. Francis's prayer, it is given that we receive. I have never seen a volunteer who is not happy, but always joyful. And part of our spiritual Christian message is the message from Jesus. And I'm saying today to anyone, please enter into a personal relationship with Jesus. And if you do, you will remember that life is about helping others. And when you help others, you'll be joyful and you'll be happy. And Jesus himself said, I came not to be served, but to serve. So the people who serve are joyful and happy. And that's my one little piece of spiritual advice I give.
So on behalf of Carlow Mental Health Association, Father John, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for having this conversation with me tonight. I've really enjoyed your pearls of wisdom, your stories, and your faith, and everything you've had to say tonight. It's been a very interesting conversation, and thank you very much for being part of Mensana Fest 2021.
You're welcome, but it's been my pleasure. Thank you, Catherine.